letter arrived and Elizabeth Taylor cried for 3 hours straight. America's sweetheart broke that night. The story of that letter nobody talks about starts right here. On that cold winter day in 1957, Elizabeth Taylor sat in her Beverly Hills home, sipping her morning coffee. She was only 25 years old, but her eyes carried the weariness of a woman who had seen far too much. The morning sun streamed through her silk curtains, casting golden shadows across the marble floors of her mansion. Everything around her screamed success, wealth, beauty, but Elizabeth felt hollow inside. She had spent the previous night at another Hollywood party, smiling for cameras, charming directors, playing the role everyone expected her to play. The role of Elizabeth Taylor, movie star. But when she came home and removed her makeup, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. When the mail arrived, when she saw that envelope among the usual fan letters and business correspondence, her heart stopped dead. The handwriting was unmistakable. Careful, precise, the same penmanship that had signed her report cards, birthday cards, Christmas presents throughout her childhood. She recognized it immediately. It was from her father, Francis Taylor. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since that terrible fight that had torn their relationship apart. Elizabeth's Hollywood career, her marriage scandals, her wild lifestyle, her rebellion against everything he had tried to teach her, everything had built a wall between them that seemed impossible to tear down. Francis Taylor had been a simple man with strong values. He believed in family, in decency, in keeping your private life private. When his daughter became Hollywood's most talked about starlet, when her personal dramas began making headlines, when her marriages became public spectacles, he couldn't understand how his little princess had become someone he didn't recognize. But as Elizabeth held that letter in her trembling hands, let me tell you what really happened that morning, what the newspapers never reported, what even her closest friends didn't know. Elizabeth had been struggling with something much deeper than anyone realized. The glamorous life everyone envied was suffocating her. She felt trapped between being the woman Hollywood had created and the little girl her father once knew and loved. Every morning, she woke up and put on a mask. The mask of confidence, of sex appeal, of the woman who had everything. But underneath that mask, she was drowning. The pressure to be perfect, to be beautiful, to be desired by millions while remaining untouchable, was eating her alive from the inside. She remembered the last conversation with her father like it was yesterday. She had called him after her second divorce, hoping for comfort, or understanding. Instead, he had been cold, distant. "Elizabeth," he had said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "what happened to the daughter I raised? What happened to the girl who used to care about more than headlines and scandals?" Those words had cut deeper than any critic's review, deeper than any gossip columnist's cruel observations. Because they came from the one man whose opinion had always mattered more than anyone else's. The man who had held her hand during her first audition, who had been so proud when she got her first role, who had believed in her dreams before anyone else did. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. What fell out wasn't just a letter. A small photograph dropped to the floor, a picture of herself at age 7, wearing a white dress, standing in their family garden, smiling with the pure, innocent joy that only children possess. But it was the note written on the back of that photograph that shattered her completely. "Elizabeth, I never stopped loving you. But now it's too late. Your father." She stared at those words until they blurred through her tears. Too late. What did that mean? Too late for what? For forgiveness? For understanding? For the relationship they once had? The letter continued, and with each word, Elizabeth felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Her father's handwriting, usually so steady and strong, seemed shaky, uncertain. He wrote about his illness, something he had kept hidden from her. He wrote about his loneliness, about sitting in his empty house, looking at old photographs of her childhood, wondering where he had gone wrong as a father. "I used to call you my little princess," he wrote, "and I meant it with all my heart. Now the whole world knows you as a princess, Hollywood royalty, but I'm just an old man who misses his daughter. I miss the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her stories. I miss the child who believed her father could fix anything, solve any problem, chase away any monster." As Elizabeth read those words, tears began streaming down her face, ruining her perfectly applied makeup, but she didn't care. She had gotten lost in Hollywood's glittering world, intoxicated by the power that fame brought, addicted to the attention, the adoration, the constant validation from strangers. But those sentences transported her back to being that 7-year-old girl who just wanted her daddy's approval, who believed he was the strongest, wisest man in the world. She remembered Sunday mornings in their old house, before the fame, before the movies, before everything changed. Her father would make pancakes, and they would sit together at the kitchen table, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. He would listen to her dreams, her fears, her silly childhood worries with the same serious attention he gave to important business matters. "You're going to do amazing things, princess," he would tell her, ruffling her hair. "But always remember who you are. Always remember that you're my daughter first, everything else second." Somewhere along the way, that balance had shifted. The actress had consumed the daughter. The star had eclipsed the person. And now, holding his letter, she realized how far she had drifted from that little girl he had loved so completely. She remembered the last time they spoke. It was after her divorce from Nicky Hilton, after the tabloids had had a field day with the details of their failed marriage, after her personal life had become public entertainment. Francis had called her, not to congratulate her on her latest film success, but to express his disappointment in her choices. "Elizabeth," he had said, his voice heavy with sadness, "I don't understand what's happened to you. The daughter I raised would never have allowed her private life to become a circus. You're better than this. You're worth more than these headlines." She had exploded in anger, years of pressure and judgment finally boiling over. "You don't understand," she had screamed into the phone. "You don't know what it's like to live under a microscope, to have every mistake magnified, to be expected to be perfect all the time. I'm trying to live my life, and all you do is judge me." "I'm not judging you," he had replied quietly. "I'm worried about you. I'm afraid I'm losing my daughter to a world that doesn't care about her soul." "Well, maybe your daughter is gone," Elizabeth had shot back, the words flying out before she could stop them. "Maybe the little princess you remember doesn't exist anymore. Maybe this is who I am now." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Francis had spoken, his voice barely a whisper. "If that's true, Elizabeth, then I've failed as a father." The line went dead. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of silence, of pride keeping them apart, of words that couldn't be taken back. Now, holding his letter, she realized how wrong they both had been. Her father wasn't judging her. He was terrified. Terrified of losing his little girl to a world that consumed everything pure and innocent. And she had been so desperate to prove her independence, her adulthood, her right to make her own mistakes, that she had forgotten the most important thing: he was her father, and he loved her. The letter continued, "I know I was too hard on you sometimes. I know I didn't understand the pressures you faced. Hollywood is a world I never understood, never trusted. When I saw what it was doing to you, how it was changing you, I panicked. I thought if I could just pull you back, make you remember who you were before all this started, I could save you from it." Elizabeth's hands were shaking as she read on. "But I was wrong, wasn't I? You weren't mine to save. You were growing up, becoming your own person, making your own choices. I should have supported you instead of criticizing you. I should have been the safe harbor you could return to instead of another storm you had to weather." But then the phone rang, cutting through her emotional breakdown like a knife. Elizabeth's heart was already breaking, but the terrible truth she was about to learn was waiting at her doorstep, ready to destroy what little composure she had left. She answered with a shaky voice, still clutching the letter to her chest. The person on the other end was Dr. Matthews, her father's longtime physician. His voice was trembling as he spoke. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, your father, Francis, he passed away this morning, peacefully, in his sleep. The cancer, it was too advanced. He asked me to call you after his letter arrived." Elizabeth dropped the phone. The crash echoed through her empty house like a gunshot. The letter was still in her hand, her father's words of love and regret still fresh on the page. Her father had written this letter, sealed it, mailed it, and then, left forever. His final words had come through a piece of paper. Their last chance for reconciliation had been reduced to a letter that arrived too late for her to respond, too late for her to tell him she loved him too late for her to apologize for the harsh words she could never take back. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. While she was reading his words of love and forgiveness, Francis Taylor was already gone. The conversation she had secretly hoped for, the reconciliation that could have healed everything, the chance to be his little princess one more time, would never happen. Elizabeth collapsed into her chair, the letter pressed against her chest, and began to sob. These weren't the controlled tears of a movie scene or the calculated emotion of a public appearance. This was raw, devastating grief mixed with regret so deep it felt like it might swallow her whole. She thought about all the premieres he had missed because of their estrangement, all the awards shows where his chair sat empty, all the times she had wanted to call but was too proud to pick up the phone. She thought about all the achievements she couldn't share with him, all the moments when she needed his advice but was too stubborn to ask for it. But the most painful truth was yet to come. In her grief, Elizabeth had only read the first page of her father's letter. There was more, so much more. The second page was even heavier, written in the same shaky handwriting but with what seemed like even greater effort, as if each word had cost him something precious. Her father wrote, "I know, my daughter, I was too harsh with you. But I was scared, so scared of losing you. Hollywood took you away from me, or at least that's how it felt. Those lights, those cameras, that whole world that I couldn't understand or protect you from. I thought I had lost my little Elizabeth forever. But I was wrong. You always remained my daughter. Even when we weren't speaking, even when I was angry and disappointed, even when I said things I shouldn't have said, you were still my little girl." Elizabeth could barely breathe as she continued reading. The words seemed to be written by a different man than the stern, judgmental father she remembered from their last conversation. This was the father of her childhood, the one who had tucked her into bed every night, who had kissed her scraped knees, who had told her she could be anything she wanted to be. "I've been watching your movies," he continued, and Elizabeth's heart nearly stopped. "All of them. I sit in the back of the theater, and I watch my daughter on that big screen, and I'm so proud I can barely contain myself. You're magnificent, Elizabeth. You're everything I always knew you could be. I just wanted to make sure you didn't lose yourself in all that magnificence." She reached the end of the letter with tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief. "If you're reading this, know that I forgave you long ago for the harsh words we exchanged. I hope you can forgive me too. I hope you can forgive a foolish old man who loved his daughter so much he didn't know how to let her grow up. Now I only want one thing: be happy, my little princess. Live the life you choose, love who you want to love, make the mistakes you need to make. Just remember sometimes that you were loved. Completely, unconditionally, forever loved. Your father." Elizabeth began sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't just tears, years of buried pain, regret, longing, and love were pouring out of her like a dam had burst. She cried for the time they had wasted, for the words they hadn't said, for the pride that had kept them apart. She cried for 3 hours straight, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw and she had no tears left. Makeup artists came calling, photographers rang, messages flooded in from film sets and studios. But Elizabeth spoke to no one that day. Her publicist fielded calls, making excuses about illness, exhaustion, anything to keep the world away from her grief. Because that letter had reminded her of something crucial, something she had forgotten in all the glitz and glamour and chaos of her Hollywood life. Beneath all her fame, her beauty, her success, beneath the image and the persona and the public Elizabeth Taylor, there was still a little girl who had been loved by her father. Purely, completely, unconditionally loved. That evening, Elizabeth sat alone in her mansion, surrounded by all the luxuries her career had brought her. Golden statues lined her shelves, expensive jewelry filled her drawers, designer gowns hung in her closets. None of it mattered anymore. She would have traded it all, every award, every dollar, every moment of fame, for one more conversation with her father. One more chance to hear him call her his little princess. One more opportunity to tell him she loved him too. She remembered how he used to take her to the studio when she was young, back when she was just getting started, when everything was new and exciting and innocent. How he would watch her rehearse with such pride in his eyes, such wonder at what his daughter could do. How he would brush her hair before important meetings and tell her she was going to be the most beautiful, most talented actress in the world. But never forget, he would whisper, adjusting her collar or straightening her dress, "You're my daughter first, actress second. That's the most important role you'll ever have." The irony was devastating. In trying to be the best actress she could be, in pursuing excellence and success and recognition, she had forgotten the most important part of who she was. She had lost sight of the little girl who had made her father so proud just by being herself. But late that night, as Elizabeth sat in her father's chair, holding the letter and the photograph, she noticed something she had missed earlier. As she turned over the envelope, she saw another small note written in her father's familiar handwriting, "Look under the drawer." What drawer? Elizabeth's mind raced. Which drawer? Then she remembered, her father's old desk in the house where she had grown up. The house that still held so many memories, so many traces of the life they had shared before everything changed. Elizabeth drove through the empty streets of Los Angeles, still in her nightgown, her face stained with tears, not caring who might see her or what the gossip columns might say. For once in her life, she didn't care about her image, her reputation, her public persona. She just needed to find whatever her father had left for her. The old house was dark, filled with dust and shadows and the ghosts of better times. Elizabeth made her way to her father's study, to the old wooden desk where he used to pay bills and write letters and help her with her homework when she was small. Under the drawer, taped to the wood where no one would think to look, she found a small metal box. Her hands were trembling as she opened it, not knowing what to expect, what final surprise her father might have left for her. Inside were dozens of photographs. All of Elizabeth's childhood moments, carefully preserved and lovingly maintained. Pictures of her first day of school, her first movie audition, her first premiere. Pictures of birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Sunday afternoons. And on the back of each photo, written in her father's neat handwriting, were notes: our pride and joy, my little star, the most beautiful girl in the world, my daughter, my heart. He had kept them all. Every single memory, every moment of her childhood and young adulthood, every milestone and achievement. Even during their estrangement, even when they weren't speaking, he had treasured these memories, these glimpses of the daughter he had loved so completely. But at the very bottom of the box was something that made Elizabeth's breath catch in her throat. Another envelope, thicker than the first, with her name written on it in the same careful script. This letter was different. Older, more worn, as if it had been handled many times, written and rewritten, sealed and unsealed. Francis Taylor was gone, but he had left his daughter one final gift, one last message, one more piece of his heart. And as Elizabeth opened this second letter, she knew that whatever it contained would change everything she thought she knew about her father, about their relationship, about the choices that had driven them apart. The letter began: My dearest Elizabeth, there's something I never told you about the day you got your first movie contract. Something I should have said years ago, but I was too proud, too afraid, too foolish to admit.